This is Professor Derf Sites. This Java tutorial demonstrates the switch selection flow control statement. We have a class switch, a main function, and some functions that we'll call to illustrate various aspects of the switch statement. First, switch on an int. We have an integer value 3 here that will be the condition that the switch statement will test on. The case statements show the values that will run them, and if we have a 3, it'll be this case right here that will run where the 3 is. Case statements are blocks of code that will continue going sequentially until they hit a break statement or a return statement, if there's a return statement to come out of the function. You can put braces on a case statement. On these simple ones here, for illustrative purposes, I did not put braces, but if you had a more complicated case statement, you would put a beginning and ending brace as well that would line up as such. So here's a switch on an integer. Next, you can switch on a string. Tree is a string, has the value birch, and in the cases you put strings. Again, it will run that case block, whatever code is in there, until it sees a break or a return statement. Switch on a default case. We set our integer to 7 here, and we don't have a case for 7, but you can have a default case. Default, if none of the other values are found, and it looks through, at all the values, then you'll run the default block down here. Run with fall through. We have 2 as our value here for our test value. Notice that these cases 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8 do not have break statements. So when you come into any one of them, they will continue to fall through all the way down until this break statement right here. And all of them will tell you what case you were in, and finally in case 8, you say it was an even single-digit number because all these are even single-digit numbers. Here, cases 1 through 9 are odd. No break statements until this point, and then a default. The default is only run if none of the other cases are run. That's the only time the default is run. And the cases, as shown here, when you go into a case, it will continue to fall straight down, bypassing even the other case labels and going into their blocks until it sees a break. And that's useful, as we see in this example. That can be put to an advantage. Here we have a switch with some nested flows. The cases can be any code that you want in there. You can have if-else's in there, other selection mechanisms besides if-else, function calls to go out to another block of code and come back. So they're not restricted to just sequential flow inside these case blocks. They're blocks of code like any block of code. And in fact, here we have an if-else in this one, and a function call right here to a worker function in one of those. And we have a for loop in this other one. If you don't know about a for loop yet, then just understand that any types of code can be put in the case blocks. Here's our worker function down here. We're going to go ahead and run this and look at the output from this program. Here's the output from our first run. Switch on the int 3, we hit case 3, and the value of I after the case statement is 3. We'll look at that when we go back in the code. Here we switch on a string birch and we hit the case birch. Here we switch on 7, we hit the default case, and then we printed out I. Switch on 2, it hit the 2 and it fell through all those other cases, said that it was an even digit. And here switch with a nested statement inside there. I before switch is 1, and we hit case 1. We hit other is 7, and I after switch. We'll look at those when we go back in now that we've seen the output on that. Going back into the code, now that we've looked at the output of the first run, let's look more closely at some of the code here. On these cases, they print the case and they also will print out the value of I, say an I, colon, and then the value there. As we go down here further, we see that again here in the default of this particular example here. I is being shown on the default case. Moving down here, looking at the code a little bit more. This case here on the switch with nested flows, there's a comment down here. Look at case 3. It says for case 3, I will be changed. So before we go into the switch block, we have I before the switch. We take whatever I is. Notice that I is a local variable inside the function, but it's declared before the switch block. And then when we get down to case 3, and we'll test that shortly when we change the values again, we get down to case 3, there's a for loop in here, and notice that the for loop uses I and initializes it to other, which is up here at 7, and then loops through and increments I. So the original I is being changed because this didn't say int I here. If it had said int I, this would be local to this for block, but it's actually changing I. So when we come out here, we'll see a different I on this when we get into case 3. Let's go ahead and we're going to change the values of the test variables now. Here's the output from our second run where we changed the variables to their next test values. Here we switched on 5, didn't get a hit on anything, and there was no default. Switch on oak, got oak. Switched on 7, hit the default case. Switched on 5, we hit 5, fell through 7 and 9, and was odd. Switched on 2 down here. I before the switch was 2. We called a method in case 2 down there. Notice case 2 begin, then we called a worker method, and then call case 2 in, and then I was not changed. We'll go back to the code again. We're back in the code, and we changed the values of the test variables. This one we changed to 30 in the fall through, and it's going to cause the default to say it's not a single digit number. Here we changed in the nested flows to 3. That's going to bring us down to this for loop where the switch control variable will actually be changed in the switch, and we'll see a difference when you come out of it. So let's run this test. Here's the output. Switched on a 3, we got case 3. Switched on Birch again, went back to that. The default case here. Here we switched on 30. Got the default case that it's not a single digit number. Here case 3 on this nested flow, and that was the for loop, which is going to start with 7, which was other, and just start printing out and then stop at a certain point. And so before the switch I was 3, and after the switch I is 18, and it was actually changed by the in one of the cases of the switch statement. Going back to the code again. To review, we can switch on an integer. Each case is a block. Can have anything, any code you want in there. They go sequentially unless there's other flow controls, and they end at a break, or if there's a return statement that takes you out of the function. They can have braces. The switch can have a string as its control variable. You can have a default in case none of the cases are found. It will run the default case. The fall through technique, when you leave out the breaks and you enter a case, it will fall down until it finds one and run through all that code. You could have nested selections in there and for loops, whatever you want inside your cases, or call methods. So switch statement is a very nice statement in your toolkit of selection flow control structures.